Frank Sutton became super famous in the 1960s. His loud voice and red, angry face as Sergeant Vince Carter made him one of TV's most memorable characters. Millions of people watching TV thought he was the perfect example of a strict military man. He looked like someone who could explode with anger at any second. But behind all that yelling was a man dealing with something much harder than just reading lines on a TV show. For many years, Frank kept quiet about his own painful war memories, the stress of being famous, and the uncomfortable feelings that followed him when he worked on the show Gomer Pyle, USMC. What he finally told people late in his career completely changed how his fans saw him forever. Way before Frank Sutton ever stood under the bright lights of a Hollywood TV studio, he had already fought in real wars. His path to becoming famous didn't start with acting tryouts or reading scripts. It started because he really wanted to serve his country. When World War II started, Sutton dreamed about joining the U.S. Marine Corps. He loved how disciplined they were, how respected they were, and the honor that came with wearing their uniform. For a young guy who liked rules and being tough, the Marines seemed absolutely perfect. But in just one moment, that dream was crushed. When he tried to join, he failed a test that checks if you can see colors correctly. That one test failure meant he could never wear the Marine uniform he wanted so badly. For someone who looked up to the Marines so much, it felt like his heart was broken. Most guys would have just given up and gone home, but Sutton was way too determined to quit. He decided to join the U.S. Army instead, and they accepted him right away and sent him straight into fighting. He got sent to the Pacific Theater, which was one of the most dangerous and brutal places to fight in the whole war. Sutton ended up fighting in 14 different assault landings, a number that still surprises people who only knew him as a funny TV actor. This wasn't the story of some spoiled actor just waiting around for his big chance at fame. This was the real life of a tough, experienced soldier. In the hot, sticky jungles and dangerous beaches of the Pacific, Sutton learned what it really meant to be scared and how to stay alive. Night after night, he faced the real chance that he might die. But he kept going forward, fighting right alongside his fellow soldiers. Because he was so brave, he earned the Bronze Star Medal for doing heroic or really impressive things, and the Purple Heart Medal for getting hurt while fighting. Those medals were proof that he had sacrificed a lot. But Sutton himself almost never talked about them. To him, they weren't prizes to brag about. They were reminders of terrible moments he had lived through, moments that many of his friends and fellow soldiers never survived. Many years later, someone asked him if his time in the military changed how he acted as Sergeant Carter on Gomer Pyle, USMC. Sutton gave an answer that was totally honest and straight to the point. "I just remember what it felt like to be scared and trying not to show it." That one sentence told people more than any fancy interview or press release ever could. His famous anger, the explosive yelling, the tense way he held his body. These weren't just tricks to make people laugh. They were echoes of what it was really like to be a soldier, born from memories of hiding his fear by acting strict and powerful. But Sutton never liked talking about his time in the war. His friends thought maybe he was just humble, the kind of quiet modesty that was common with soldiers from his time period. Other people thought it was because the memories were just too painful to think about again. Whatever the real reason was, by the time he came back home and graduated from Columbia University with really good grades in drama, his life seemed like it was heading somewhere completely different from war. But one thing was impossible to deny. The war had already left its mark deep inside him. Even when he was on stage or on TV, the shadows of his combat years stayed with him, shaping every role he played, every yell he made, every angry look he gave. The soldier part of him never left the actor. It just lived underneath the spotlight, hidden where everyone could see it, but not really understand it. And it became Sergeant Carter. In 1964, a show called Gomer Pyle, USMC, started on CBS as a spin-off from The Andy Griffith Show. Jim Nabors had made audiences love him by playing his character with wide, innocent eyes and goofy charm as Gomer, and putting that character in the U.S. Marines created a perfect setup for comedy. Then Frank Sutton came in as Gunnery Sergeant Vince Carter. From the very first moment he marched onto the TV screen with his red face and booming voice, He became the perfect opposite of Neighbors' clumsy, bumbling recruit. Their relationship on screen was instant magic. One man was all loud and in charge, the other was naive and always seeing the bright side. Sutton's acting was so sharp and so real that many people assumed he wasn't even acting at all. Viewers believed that the loud, impatient, constantly angry Carter was just who Sutton was in real life. That wrong idea stuck with him for his whole career, covering up his real private, quieter personality. But for people watching at home, the chemistry between Neighbors' gentle Gomer and Sutton's explosive Carter was impossible to resist. During its first season, the show became hugely popular in ratings, bringing in millions of viewers every single week, and quickly becoming one of CBS's most successful sitcoms of the whole decade. Behind all the laughter, though the mood on set was more complicated, Sutton was a perfectionist, someone who treated every 30-minute sitcom episode as seriously as if it were a live theater play. He wanted the timing to be sharp, the jokes to be precise, and the energy to be tight. Neighbors, on the other hand, had a more relaxed, casual way of doing things. While he often played scenes with an easy, natural feel, Sutton practiced his lines over and over, demanding rehearsal after rehearsal, until he felt like everything was landing perfectly. Over time, those differences started creating tension and friction. People who worked on the crew whispered about how frustrated Sutton would get when scenes went too far into silly slapstick comedy or dragged on for too long. He didn't usually raise his voice when the cameras were off. His silence was actually way more scary and unsettling. One producer remembered later, "Frank had a temper, but it was silent. You didn't want to be in the room when he stopped talking." By the fourth season, people working on the show noticed that Sutton and Neighbors only talked to each other when the script said they had to. When the cameras were off, their relationship had cooled down into just being professional and distant. By the late 1960s, Gomer Pyle USMC was still one of CBS's strongest and most popular shows. The pairing of Frank Sutton and Jim Neighbors had carried the sitcom successfully for 5 whole seasons, making people laugh while also taking advantage of how popular military-themed comedies were. But all good things come to an end, and in 1969, Neighbors shocked the TV network by announcing that he was finished. He wanted to focus on singing, doing variety shows, and working on stage. For Sutton, who had given so much of himself to playing Sergeant Carter, the announcement felt like the ground was disappearing from under his feet. TV executives scrambled around frantically looking for a solution. CBS came up with an idea called Sergeant Carter USMC, a spin-off show that would put Sutton right in the center as the main character. Early ideas even suggested something groundbreaking and new, introducing a black recruit who would always be smarter than Carter and outsmart him, flipping the formula of the original show completely around. On paper, it sounded fresh and exciting. For Sutton, however, it was exactly what he did not want. He was exhausted and tired from all the constant yelling, from playing the one-dimensional authority figure, and from the endless typecasting. He turned it down flat and said no immediately. That refusal absolutely stunned the network executives. To CBS, Frank Sutton was Sergeant Carter, and the audience still wanted to see more of him. But Sutton wanted out. He desperately needed to prove both to Hollywood and to himself that he was way more than just a single character. So when Neighbors launched a new show called The Jim Neighbors Hour later that year, Sutton joined the cast, but not as the drill sergeant. He became a regular in comedy sketches instead. For him, it was like a lifeline, like being saved. He could still work with Neighbors and still have an audience watching him, but he could avoid being trapped inside the uniform that had become like a cage around him. The Jim Neighbors Hour started in 1969 with really high expectations from everyone. The format mixed together music, comedy sketches, and guest stars, and it quickly found people who loved watching it. Along with Neighbors, both Ronnie Shell and Frank Sutton came back, and they were joined by singer Karen Morrow, the Tony Moranti Dancers, and the Neighbors Kids group. It was colorful, musical, and sometimes chaotic and messy, but it worked really well. The show pulled in strong ratings and seemed like it was set up for a long, successful run. But in the back offices of CBS, trouble and friction was building up. The executives were disappointed and upset that Sutton had rejected the Sergeant Carter spin-off show. They also believed he didn't quite fit into the variety show format. While he was excellent and really good in comedy sketches, Sutton couldn't sing or dance, and that made him different and set him apart in a program that was built around music. Soon, CBS demanded that Neighbors fire him from the show. The message was harsh and blunt. Drop Sutton or risk losing the whole show itself. Neighbors' response completely shocked them. He refused to do it. Even though they had their differences and tensions on the set of Gomer Pyle, Neighbors considered Sutton a loyal friend and a really important part of his success. He wouldn't betray him just for ratings or to make a TV network happy. That decision came with serious consequences. After only 2 seasons, even though the show was doing really well, the Jim Neighbors Hour was canceled in 1971. Publicly, CBS blamed something they called the rural purge, their effort to get rid of shows with a country feeling like Mayberry RFD, the Beverly Hillbillies, and Green Acres. Privately, people working behind the scenes knew the real truth. The network had never forgiven Sutton for turning down the spin-off, and Neighbors' refusal to abandon him sealed the show's fate and ended it. For Sutton, the cancellation was like getting hit twice. He had finally stepped out of Sergeant Carter's shadow, only to get dragged down by forces he couldn't control. For Neighbors, it proved just how loyal he was as a friend, but it also ended one of the most promising and exciting variety shows of that time period. What remained and stayed strong was the bond between the two men, a bond that was created through laughter, tension, and ultimately standing up against a network that wanted to tear them apart. After the Jim Neighbors Hour ended in 1971, Frank Sutton entered one of the most difficult and challenging parts of his whole career. The entertainment industry still only saw him as Sergeant Carter, and nothing else seemed to work out or stick. Job offers came in, but almost all of them were just different versions of the same exact character. Angry sergeants, loud bosses, authority figures who yelled and barked more than they actually spoke. Sutton turned most of them down and said no. He didn't want to spend the rest of his entire life playing a fake, exaggerated version of himself. Instead, he turned his attention back to working in theater, where the audiences were smaller, but the respect was much greater and more meaningful. On stage, he could be someone other than Carter. He found real joy in drama, in roles that needed him to show depth and nuance rather than just being loud. People who saw him in these theater productions described a man who was completely transformed, still intense, but in ways that showed his depth rather than hiding it. Yet even in this safe place and refuge, the shadow of Sergeant Carter still followed him everywhere. Fans greeted him by saying catchphrases from Gomer Pyle. Children would salute him in public places, and strangers begged him to yell just like he did on TV. What had started as people being nice and flattering became like a prison around him. His family noticed the toll it was taking on him. Sutton became more withdrawn and private in the early 1970s, putting his energy into reading books, studying, and spending quiet evenings at home with his wife Toby and their children. To the people who were closest to him, he wasn't the loud, brash sergeant at all. He was a thoughtful, smart man, often seen with a book in his hand, far away and removed from the character that had made him famous. But the weight and pressure of being trapped inside one single role, while knowing deep down that he was capable of so much more, slowly wore him down bit by bit. By 1974, Sutton seemed to be finding a fragile, delicate kind of peace. He was starring in stage plays again, free from the TV cameras and the suffocating, crushing expectations of television. It was in many ways like being reborn and starting fresh, but fate had a cruel and twisted surprise waiting for him. On June 28, 1974, Frank Sutton was in Shreveport, Louisiana, performing in a romantic comedy play called Love. It was supposed to be the start and beginning of a brand new chapter in his life. During a break between performances, he went back to his dressing room. Just moments later, he collapsed from a massive, sudden heart attack. At only 50 years old, he was gone and dead. The suddenness of it stunned absolutely everyone. Fans, colleagues and co-workers, and his family who had just seen him hours earlier, full of life and energy on stage. The funeral was quiet. just like how Sutton had lived much of his private life. There was no Hollywood fanfare or big show, no press circus or media attention, just close friends and family members. Jim Nabors, who was deeply shaken and upset, released a short statement praising Sutton as a brilliant performer and a good man. Yet even in death, Sutton remained Sergeant Carter in the eyes and minds of millions of people. Tributes and memories focused on the shouting Marine character, and they rarely mentioned the war veteran, the scholar, or the stage actor who had spent so many years trying to get his real identity back. For many decades, the deeper, more complete story of Frank Sutton remained untold and hidden. Then in 2023, an old audio interview came back and resurfaced from the early 1970s. In it, Sutton was asked if he missed working on Gomer Pyle. After a long pause and moment of silence, he admitted something really honest. "I miss working. I miss doing something that people care about, but the show? No, it boxed me in. You know how some people get typecast? I became the type." He added more, saying that while he respected Jim Nabors, "We were never close. We worked different. We thought different. I was yelling half the time because I was frustrated. Not at him. At the job. At how small it made everything feel." That single line, "how small it made everything feel," was absolutely devastating and heartbreaking. The role that had made him a huge star had also taken away his chance to be anything else. And yet in his quiet way, he endured it and kept going. He carried the burden with dignity and grace, never exploding or losing it in public, never lashing out at his fans, even as the weight kept getting heavier and heavier. Today, when reruns of Gomer Pyle USMC play on TV, viewers still laugh at Sutton's furious, angry outbursts. But behind those laughs is the story of a man who gave absolutely everything to a role that took more from him than it ever gave back. His silence was like his shield and protection, but his final words revealed the real truth. Frank Sutton wasn't Sergeant Carter at all. He was a war hero, a scholar and educated man, a husband, and a father who got trapped in the uniform of a character he never fully escaped from. Frank Sutton's story is way more than just television history. It's a reminder of what fame really costs, and the hidden battles that happen behind all the laughter. What do you remember most about Sergeant Carter? Share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more untold stories about Hollywood legends and famous people.